Hello and welcome to the Teachers E-Symposium by the Oxford University Press. This session is on computational thinking. My name is Raheel Essa and I'm an electrical and electronic engineer from the University of Liverpool, UK. I'm currently working as the Deputy Manager for Education Technology at the City School. I have a lot of experience in computing curriculum and ICT development and implementation, as well as in STEM fields. Let's start out with a tiny little activity. I would like you to turn this fish around by moving 3 matches only. I wonder if you can figure that out. Some of you might find that you'd have to use 4 matches. So turn this one around, move these 2 back here and turn this one around, right? But actually it's very easy to do it with 3 matches if you think differently. Let's take a look at the solution. There you go. Seems simple now, doesn't it? What skills would you have to use to solve this problem? Do you think you used critical thinking, problem solving? How about abstraction? So, let's take a look at the aims and objectives. We're going to discover computational thinking, we'll connect it with our curriculum, and we'll go through some activities with multi-curricular linkages. So I'd like to introduce you to a small challenge. Can you find the sum of all numbers from 1 to 200? You have 30 seconds. So all the numbers from 1 to 200, most of you will start like this. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and so on, all the way to 200. But a better manner would be to try and look at it from a different perspective. What if you looked at it like this? Do you see a pattern? How about here? The 2 numbers on opposite ends of the numbers scale, they add up to 201, right? 200 plus 1. What about the next 2 numbers? The second number from the left, second number from the right. 2 and 199, they add up to 201 as well. That's a pattern. That's some sort of pattern, isn't it? So let's see if we can figure this out. Let's jot down these findings, right? We find that numbers on opposite ends always add up to 201. Yeah? And we also find that since we're using those pairs, then the number of pairs would be the total number divided by 2, because 2 makes a pair. So 200 over 2, that's 100 pairs. So if we put these findings together, we'll end up with a little equation that says the sum of numbers from 1 to 200 is equal to 1 plus 200, that is the sum of a pair, multiplied by the number of pairs. That is 20,100. In fact, let's take this a step further towards abstraction. If we wanted to make it work for any number, the sum of numbers from 1 to n would equal 1 plus n multiplied by n divided by 2, which is equal to n plus n squared over 2. Now the thing is, that's a bit abstract, isn't it? Even the one with the numbers is quite abstract. It's quite hard to pinpoint, quite hard to jot down, figure out. Let's change that. Let's go for something a little more straightforward. How about an English challenge? Here you have 3 sentences. Okay. Now I want you to just note down the parts of each sentence that are repeated. Okay. So I chose a lion, then rolled a 6, then a 4, then a 2. That means I need to draw a black cupcake on my lion's tail. I chose a donkey and rolled a 3, then a 2, then a 1. That means I need to draw a yellow pineapple on my donkey's head. I chose a puppy, then rolled a 5 then a 3, then a 5. That means I need to draw a pink salmon on my puppy's nose. So let me show you what's being repeated. Just circle those. I chose a something, animal, and rolled a number, then another number, then a third number. That means I need to draw a color something on my animal's body part, right? And if we want, we can write it with blanks, with empty spaces like this. I chose a dash and rolled a dash, then a dash, then a dash. So that means I need to draw a dash dash on my dash's dash. So you can have a student pick out a random animal and place it in the first field. You can have a second student roll the dice. Well, in this case, you can use 3 dice or 1 die that you roll 3 times. And the third student can select the color at random from a list or the color based on the dice. The list could be designed by all 3 students, right? So here are the animals. There's a lion, puppy, and donkey, and there's a chicken, an aardvark, and a tapir. Some dice for you, some colors. Here are the random objects and the body parts. So the list could look something like this. There's the dice roll, or the die roll, the colors, right? The object, and the body part. And you could use this on any number of objects. You've completely abstracted this. Basically, you could replace the first dash with something else, not just animals, maybe objects, maybe types of airplane. And rolled a could be replaced with drew a card. So any particular card that could increase the number of options as well, or use a 20-sided die if you like. So what we did was we saw a big problem, we analyzed it, and we decomposed it. Not just here, but also in the math problem. If you think about it, that was a big problem. Counting all the numbers from 1 to 200 is quite a daunting task. Counting them would take quite a lot more than 30 seconds. But if you were given that equation, you would solve it in less than 10, I'd say. It's quite simple, right? So we analyzed it and we decomposed it, and we looked for patterns in the sentences or the numbers. After that, we created an abstract model that could work in different scenarios. What is that called? It's called an algorithm, right? So the big problem was counting from 1 to 200, or looking at all these different sentences and seeing what's going on. And effectively, when it comes to the English challenge, we created a little game. But we worked backwards to create that game. Looking for patterns, analyzing, and creating abstract models and algorithms. What do you think this process is called? I think it's called computational thinking. Decomposition, breaking big problems into smaller, easier to manage problems, pattern recognition, analysis, looking for repeating sequences, algorithmic design, creating a step-by-step instruction set, kind of like a flow diagram maybe. That's what is shown over here. And abstraction. You remove everything that's unnecessary. Get rid of it all. Just keep everything that is necessary. Get rid of all the useless information. When it comes to computational thinking, that's actually how they found out that CRISPR-Cas9 works in the way it does. If you've heard of CRISPR, you know that it's a kind of it's a gene. It's a string of RNA or DNA. Don't quote me on that. But it's a string of repeating palindromic a sequence of genome that can cut DNA and replace parts of a DNA with another part of DNA. Or was it RNA? Don't quote me on that. I'm confused with the DNA RNA part. Either way, um, they found that it's a repeating palindromic set of instructions. They did that with pattern recognition. They use the same sort of ideas to analyze our genes, analyze our DNA, and that's how they tell us that, hey, human beings are like 90% the same as, I don't know, a banana or a chimpanzee or something. How do they know that? With pattern recognition. Of course, they use computers for that, but that used to be quite a big issue, right? Back in when we didn't really have computers. In fact, I remember reading about the first missions to space and to the moon, and the computers that they used in those rockets were mostly handmade, but also they didn't have nearly the computing power of the calculators that we use in our class. So they were pretty amazing how these things were designed, and there was a lot of redundancy. So there were three computers instead of just one in case the first two failed in any way. But all the code was written in not binary, not hexadecimal, but octal. So I remember reading that when something wasn't working according to plan, they used to take all these codes and they used to print them out, right? All the outputs from the programming, and they used to lay them around in this entire long hallway, and then they used to go by, like, and walk around, actually crawl around on their hands and knees and look through all the codes, find the repetitions, find what parts should be where based on their knowledge of everything. So they would look at these codes based on the handbook that they had, and they would find repeating patterns, and they would find if there's any number that was out of that pattern, right? Because they had the patterns in front of them, and they could see, what every code did, and then they would make a note of that code in their pad, and then they'd have to go and look up what that code meant for that particular part of the system. So it was a pretty painstaking process, and when we had access to much more powerful computers, they didn't have to print all those things out with their dot matrix printers. Yes, single character printers. And then they didn't have to lay them out in an entire hallway. They could just open a file on their computer and then just go through some code right on their screen and find out where the exceptions were happening. In fact, they could write a program that could do it for them. Let's take a look at some concepts of decomposition, right? What is decomposition? It's breaking something down into smaller parts. The primary terminology would be break apart, and even earlier, you'd have to use the word pieces so that students can understand. And I think the applications are everywhere. When you use phonetic speaking, you're using different words, you're breaking them down by the pronunciation of every single letter or group of letters. And that's how you teach young students, young learners, how to say a particular word. Yeah. So some artists also use decomposition when it comes to their music. They identify what instruments they want where, and then they place them there. When you build an entire computer game, if somebody tells you to create a computer game, it's quite a daunting task. Unless you have an idea of what you want in the game, you're not going to be able to make it properly. But if you decompose the idea into smaller chunks, it's easier to think about, like graphics, levels, character design, and movement in physics, stuff like that. Yeah. The next part would be recognizing patterns. Yeah. So looking for similarities, you can use the terms patterns or matching for younger students, younger learners. Yeah. Sudoku is a perfect example of a pattern recognition game. You have the patterns from 1 till 9 in the vertical, in the column, and in the row. And each cell depends on everything that's in those two. But it also depends on the box it's in, the box of 9, in the 9 boxes of the Sudoku puzzle. So using all the information you have from there, you can figure out what number should be in that one cell by recognizing the patterns. And occasionally, the harder puzzles will have even more complex patterns, such as there's singles, there's pairs, there's triples, there's X-wings, there's all sorts of pretty fun-sounding concepts and patterns that people have figured out how to use. There's chess. Chess is the ultimate pattern recognition game. So you, as a chess player, have to think, if I play this move, how will my opponent react? What move can he play? You have to think of moves that you can play, and there's a lot of moves you can play. And then you have to think of what moves your opponent can play. And as you go deeper and deeper into your thoughts, deeper and deeper into the chain of moves, the tree becomes bigger, the tree of options, the tree of of possible moves. Obviously, you can use the concepts like min-maxing, which is reducing moves that would lead to utter failure in both cases, and stop thinking about those moves, which is actually how the chess grandmasters think. In fact, it's how a lot of chess engines think. They use this level of pattern recognition. You have to think of a move that you would play, and is there a move that can negate that move that your opponent can play? So whether you should play that move or not. And also, you have to think of, if the opponent plays the best move, what is the move you have to play after that, which could be a better or a worse move in whatever situation. So those patterns, those trends, can be pretty hard to compute just with our human brain. The next part would be abstraction. So this is where that same thing that I was talking about, min-maxing, focusing on what's important, ignoring what's unnecessary. It actually does use abstraction. So we used abstraction earlier, and we spoke about abstraction earlier when we decided to remove the numbers from the mathematical puzzle, the sum of numbers from 1 to 200. We replaced 200 with the letter n, which is an abstract, because it's not one number, it's any number. And similarly, we replaced the animals, the body parts, the colors, and the objects with blank spaces, and also dice rolls with blank spaces. So that is a form of abstraction. It's creating an area or a blank space where you can put any particular object, any particular idea, concept. Abstraction is actually quite hard to do, quite hard to think of, quite hard to understand, especially for younger students. So when it comes to abstraction, I like to look at Lego. So when you get a Lego set, you have a picture on the box. Let's say you get the Star Wars X-Wing TIE Fighter or something like that. You look at the nice picture on the box. You could even get the Bugatti Chiron if you want. And it's a beautiful, nicely made puzzle, a nicely made Lego set. It looks like the Bugatti Chiron perfectly. And you take out all the pieces and you can lay them out nicely. And then if you just look at that picture and you try to put it together, it feels like an impossible task because there's so many pieces and there's only one picture that you have. So it's the same thing as when you consider your projects, your big projects. So Lego, they give you a book inside, a book of instructions. And what they do in that book is basically they've had somebody create that model either on the computer or by hand and then break it apart into smaller, easier to manage chunks. So then they have that book which has all the instructions of those small, easy to figure out parts. Like, for example, making the wheel and attaching it to this, making just the inside chassis, putting the wheels on that, and then attaching the body panels to that in a particular way, step by step, moving up, just to make the process of making that Lego set easier. So if you were asked to just design a house, yeah, how would you do that? Let's say, let's move on to the algorithmic design. That's the concept of creating a step-by-step instruction set. So kind of like a flow diagram, kind of like a mind map. If you consider the Lego set and you consider the instruction book, you realize that it is completely step by step, but the object you're making is getting added to and getting bigger and bigger and looking more and more like what you want. And that's because they've broken it down, decomposed it, and created an algorithm to help you complete that task. It's a set of instructions. Yeah. Now, drawing a map. How many of you have been to the London Underground, the New York Tube, or the Dubai Metro? You will notice that all these three things have one thing in common. Even the British National Rail Network, you'll see the map of England in that situation, and you'll see only the salient features of the network rail, the rail network. You'll notice that there's the cities where the stations are, or even with the underground, just the stations themselves, and you'll see straight rail lines going to them. They're not adhering to the actual shape of the train tracks, because that information is actually unnecessary, right? You've removed those unnecessary bits of information, and you've created a model that is easy to understand, because all you're concerned about is this station and this station, where they are in relation to each other, and which colored train, the Victoria line, the red line, green line, whatever, will take me from here to there. Okay? You don't care about where it turns and twists. You just care about that this is connected to that. So they have removed all the unessential information, yeah, abstraction, and created an effective algorithm for you to figure out how to get from A to B. Yeah. It's creating a blueprint, creating a design, creating a flowchart. Here are the computational thinkers. Their concepts are logic, evaluation, algorithms, patterns, decomposition, and abstraction. So once again, predicting, analyzing, making judgments, making steps and rules, spotting similarities, and breaking down into small parts, small, easy to manage chunks, and removing all the unnecessary details. Their approaches are tinkering, creating, debugging, persevering, and collaborating. When I spoke of Lego earlier, if you yourself were to get a Lego set or were to design your own object in Lego, so let's say you have a bunch of Lego pieces and you design a car out of that. Now, if you want to repeat that, you can either remember exactly what it looks like, or you can break it down into smaller pieces and take pictures and create an instruction set, right? So you would be tinkering and you'd be creating when you were creating that car, right? And wherever you found any fault, you'd be debugging. And also, when you're creating the rules, the instruction set for making that Lego car, you would actually be optimizing. So you'd say, okay, I don't have enough of these pieces, so I'm going to use this piece instead of that piece. And wherever you come into problems, you persevere. And, of course, you can collaborate with your friends when you're doing something like that. So there's online Lego designers. I don't know if you've seen them. They're really awesome because you can actually go online. You can open a Chrome window, Chrome tab, and in there you'll have a Lego space with virtual Lego blocks, a virtual Lego space, and you can select any number of Lego sets that you want to try. You can click on, let's say I want to make a horse. It's going to show you the first instruction and show those virtual pieces that you need to create that. And then you can put those pieces where you're supposed to, where you want to. And then you can move on to the next set of instructions. It's exactly the same as when you're playing with Lego in real life, but of course it's missing the tactile feel of actually using Lego. But it's it's a great way of looking at Legos and how it's been broken down. That horse has been broken down into smaller chunks. First, they start with the legs, then they start with the body, and then attach the tail and the head, and then the ears and everything. It's pretty amazing. Let's extrapolate from here. The computational thinking, the concept, can be used in different topics, different subjects, and at different levels of education. You can use it to help students create their own mind maps, their own blueprints in their minds, and it's very useful in university or project-based learning assignments. I'll give you an example of my own PBL assignment. I asked students to map out all the trees in their school, all the flora in their school, okay? Take pictures of it and then create a scrapbook. But that's not how I said it. I said to them, I want you to create a book, a book of all the trees and plants, all the flora you find in your school, with as much information about each as possible. So they were confused about this, obviously, until I broke it down for them. So I told them that the sort of information I'd be looking for is pictures of each, right? Some history of their origins, where they would be found. Are they extant species or not? Or where are they extant species of? And where they come from. What is their use, if any? Where are they used? For example, if they found aloe vera, you can use it in your drinks, in your hair, in your skin, anything, right? There's many uses like that. What sort of fauna do they support? Do they support specific insects? Do they support some sort of squirrel or bird? Some birds like to create the nest in this particular type of tree or something like that. Are they useful for creating wood and creating paper, or can you use them, as firewood? So when I gave them all that information, and I told them that you have to create a nice sort of book about it, that's when they could actually get down and actually create that book, because now they had more than enough information and more than enough pieces of that puzzle. And then let's talk about my final year university project. In that, I had to create a secure hash algorithm on a field programmable gate array. So already when it comes to electrical and electronic engineering, people find it a bit harder to focus because of the fact that there's no moving parts as such. Everything is vague and abstract, right? Things are not clear, right? But when I had to create that, I was completely paralyzed by how daunting that task seemed, because of just the goal. That's all I had in my mind, until I sat down and I took a breather and just really thought about what I had to do. So I thought about my skill set currently and everything that I know currently, and the skills I need to have, and all the things I need to achieve to get to my end goal. And I even sat with my professor and I spoke to him about it. And in the end, I realized that I have to create a method of inputting data. I have to create a method of storing data. I have to create a method of actually performing the parity hashing on that data. Secure hash algorithm, by the way, is a method of parity, or I think you would call them Hamming codes. It's something similar, but it's harder to reverse. So once you can create that hash, you can then move that data forward and then store it somewhere else, and then add more data inside, and so on and so forth. So it required quite a lot of thinking and understanding. And basically, it seemed very vague to me at first, but then as I broke it down into smaller and easier to bite chunks, it became far more clear and concise and easier to achieve. And I ended up with an algorithm that did 1 million hashes in a second, which was pretty decent, not too bad. Right, so it is a way of creating a mind map. It's a way of creating a blueprint and a flow diagram. And I ended up with a method to what seemed like kind of madness. And I even made a Gantt chart of where I had to go and what the timelines were for me. I feel like these concepts these PBL assignments and these bigger, vague, overarching topics, they can work best in groups. The concepts and activities. I feel like the idea would be to have peer learning and exploration. Okay, so if you have a group of 4 students and you ask them to do a particular task, you can have one student who is the leader, and that student can delegate those tasks, assign tasks to all the other members and themselves, of course, right? So rather than having one big task, you have 4 smaller tasks. So I think computational thinking, it really employs critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. The creativity is how students approach the problem. And Bill Gates once said that he would much rather hire a lazy person to do something because he'll find a way how to do something difficult easily and in less time. So basically, Bill Gates is a big fan of jugaad, which is a kind of innovation, isn't it? Let's take a look at computational thinking in the real world. There's TED-Ed riddles, right? There's the passcode riddle, the jailbreak riddle, and the egg drop riddle. And they all require you to break problems down into important parts and useless information. There's game theory, which is used in economics, right? This is definitely a method of computational thinking. It was explained pretty well in the movie 21. I'm pretty sure most of you have seen this movie. It's about counting cards, but yes, it uses game theory. It was also demonstrated, a part of it was demonstrated in the movie A Beautiful Mind, right? The mathematician John Forbes Nash Jr. showed an aspect of it. That's Russell Crowe. There's the real John Forbes Nash Jr. Okay. Let's take a look at how we can use this in computer science. The point is simple. It's to break down large problems into smaller tasks. Okay. For example, if someone says you have to create code that runs a CNC machine, which is a milling machine that has multiple angles, multiple directions of a cutting part and the part that you want to machine, you want to cut. So you'd start off with like a cylinder or a cuboid or a circular or rectangular prism. And you would first machine that part down to some inaccurate dimension that is close but not equal by using a bigger cutting piece. And then the second pass would be getting it finer and closer to the approximate dimensions. And the third pass would bring it down to the absolute, the near perfect dimensions, very, very close, right down to it. Of course, it's aircraft grade, so it definitely would require some hand tweaking to smooth out the edges or bring it absolutely perfectly. So it is very important to keep in mind the complexities and subtleties of that part because it's aircraft grade, right? So here's our recommended book, Complete Computer Science for Cambridge IGCSE CSE and O-Levels. If you have any questions, you can put them down below. Thank you for attending.